This is The Beat with Radia B, a conversation about the Charleston County Sheriff's Office in our community. Welcome to The Beat, hosted by Radia B. Today, for our first episode, we have Sheriff Graziano, also known as Special K. Welcome, Special K.
Thank you, Radia. Thanks for bringing out the nickname first thing.
Well, tell the viewers about yourself.
Well, Radia, as you already know and the viewers may know, I am Kristin Graziano. I am a 33-year law enforcement veteran, and in November of this year, I was elected as the first sheriff in Charleston County, first woman ever elected in the state. And I've been in office since January, so I've been here about almost 6 months.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell us something unique about yourself.
Unique. All right, give me some hints.
Let's see.
What do you want it? How unique do you want it?
What about your entrepreneurship? Tell me a little bit more, and tell the viewers a little bit more about your entrepreneurship skills.
So when I finished high school and college, or before I finished college, I always wanted to be in business and make money. I grew up pretty modest home, and I was on my own at the age of 16, and I never wanted to be a statistic, so I was always doing a little more to better myself. So when I was very young, or about the age of 18, right after high school, I had watched a video and had been educating myself on investment strategies. One thing my grandmother always told me, all you had is your credit. I didn't have a lot of money. I had decent jobs, and I was always making money, but I wanted to make more. So I had $1.38 in my checking account, and I bought a house with $1.38 in my checking account because I had good credit. And I didn't live in that house but a day, because by law I only had to spend one night. I ended up renting it out and making a lot more money, and every penny I made I invested in other properties, and it just snowballed from there. But I ended up by the time I finished college, I think I had 10 houses.
Oh, that's incredible.
I didn't pay for rent ever.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That just shows a lot of great business acumen and leadership. So with that being said, what is your vision for Charleston County Sheriff Department? Tell us what's your vision based on those principles that you just gave.
So Roddy, if you know anything about me, go big or go home. I mean, that's just the way I am. I don't believe in thinking small, doing anything small. So my vision for this agency would be just like the vision I have for my life. Be the best you can be, the most well-rounded, best public safety department you can be in the country, and be something others strive to be. Be the example. And that's what I want for this agency.
As we're trying to recruit others to the Charleston County Sheriff Department, what would you give them or tell them, or some thoughts or insights about before you begin this career in law enforcement?
So I would tell you right now is the most exciting time to be in law enforcement, because what you see on the media does not portray who we are. What you see is a lot of bad things that are out there. That's a very small percentage of what law enforcement is about or does. In fact, there's nothing worse. Any cop will tell you, any decent cop will tell you, the worst thing you can have is a bad cop amongst you. So it's a great time to be a part of the change that you want to see in this career. It's necessary. Look, the statistics tell us that we haven't always done it right, but we've done what we've known and what we've been trained to do, and now it's time to retrain and rethink how we do things. So following that, it's a great time to be in law enforcement, because you can now be that change you want to see, and that is necessary. And it's exciting.
That's great. That's great. And many leaders, they have at least 3 or 4 people who are very influential in their life. Can you give me 2 or 3?
So I could tell you 2 specifically that stand out, and that was my great-grandmother and my grandmother. My great-grandmother, and both were a product of the Great Depression. My great-grandmother was a short, stocky, hunched over. She was probably 5 feet tall. I learned how to can vegetables and make your garden grow. And we lived off the land. We lived off she had a small backyard, but there was never a shortage of food, because she believed in sustainability. When I needed food for the table, she'd say, go to the cellar and get me whatever you want. Okra, green beans, whatever was out there. Stewed tomatoes. We made a lot of spaghetti sauce. And also my grandmother, her daughter. My grandmother pretty much raised me until I was 16, and then I went out on my own. But you talk about a firecracker. My grandmother taught me how to fish, and I wouldn't let me off that boat until we had enough fish to feed the family and stock the freezer. So we lived off the water, we lived off the land. They had a lot of money, but we just didn't believe in that. We saved and penny pinched, and they taught me some really good lessons. And they always said, your credit's all you have.
That's awesome.
Pay your debt.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now tell me this. What's your favorite vegetable?
I love all vegetables. I do. It's crazy. Everyone, I do. I would rather have a salad over a hamburger, or I would rather have, fresh vegetables out of the garden over potato chips. I've never had a sweet tooth, which is kind of funny. I don't like ice cream. And I love vegetables. I'll eat raw vegetables, carrots. I love carrots.
Oh, wow.
And I like carrot juice, my own carrot juice.
Wow. That's incredible. So if you could step in my shoes, what should I have asked you today?
Oh, probably about my athletic career.
Tell us more.
So I was always pretty athletic. I was a competitive bodybuilder. Played rugby in college. I was on the first women's U.S. team in 1988-89, and for rugby. And I hurt my knee, and I was going into the academy, and I started cycling to rehab my knee because I didn't want to go to the academy and flop. Mm-hmm. You got to be the best at what you do. Right. So I had to make sure I showed up, even though I was in a little bit of pain. So I started riding, and I got really good at it, and I started racing. And within about 6 months, I was on a racing circuit. I was winning races, and I was winning points. It was a point system I didn't know about. And then I became an amateur cyclist. So for about the next 6 years, I just dove into cycling, and that's what I did. So in 1996, the 2 years leading up to 1996, I had enough wins to qualify for the World Games, and I'd missed the Olympic trial. So I went to the World Games, and because I was competing, and went to the World Games in Salt Lake City, and won 5 gold medals.
Well, cool, but don't you have another part to that story? What about the straw?
The training to get there. Okay,
yes.
So, so when I learned that I was going to Salt Lake, I suspected I was going. I was one of the favorites to go. I suspected I was. I had asked a friend that was from that area, what is so different about Salt Lake? And they said, well, you cycle up to 3,250 feet, the top of Wintergreen Mountain. That's as high up as you go. When you land in Salt Lake City, you land at 4,000 feet.
Really? Oh, my goodness.
So you're 4,000 feet above sea level. So I'm a lot higher when I land, and that's the highest I ever went was 3,200 feet. And I said, well, what does it feel like? And she said, well, it's like breathing through a straw. And I was like, okay, well, let me try that. So I tried it. It was a 13% grade 3-mile climb. It's a Cat 1 climb. It's one of the toughest climbs for cyclists. And I started breathing through a straw. Well, I started with a long straw, and I couldn't breathe. so I cut it. And I cut it to about in half. And I got about, I would say, 250 feet before I almost passed out. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to grind it up this mountain. I learned quickly to take the straw out when I couldn't breathe, so I didn't pass out, put it back in, take it out. And I kept doing that, and I would make a daily climb, and eventually got to the point where I could breathe almost the whole way up through that straw. And one of my friends that was on my team that was training with me also worked for University of Virginia Hospital, and she's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to learn how to breathe through a straw so I don't flunk out in Salt Lake City. I didn't want to lose. And she said, well, that's kind of unique. So she went back and told her professor about it, and they did a story about it, and they said it was helping develop my lungs so I could actually operate with less oxygen. It's sort of what Lance Armstrong went through when you think about it. He had all that radiation and stuff that he went through. Of course, we won't say the other things he did, but they attributed that to his a lot of the therapies that he was going through, and he was able to function with less oxygen. So when I got to Salt Lake City, I was only scheduled to do 3 races, and the first one was my favorite. It was my climb. I'm a climber. I was a mountain goat, so I was that was my first race, and I blew it out of the water. Won gold medal. The next 2 were so easy. I signed up for 2 more and won 2 more gold medals.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. You solved the problem. You went outside of the box to think of how to solve the problem. You didn't whine or complain. You figured out a different way to handle the problem. And that's a great way of thinking, and great as a leader. So one of the questions that I would like to ask, and just for our viewers, is what was the biggest challenge you've had as your role as the sheriff of Charleston County, and how are you planning on overcoming it?
Radia, my day that I walked in the door started out as a challenge because there was no transition. So I was elected in November. I didn't get here till January. There was no transition in between. But dealing with all the things I dealt with, especially the first day, 3 hours after walking into the door, the death of a resident at our detention center. The next day, the insurrection. Not having that transition period from November to January with little support, and then law enforcement under increased scrutiny around the country, ending the 287G agreement, which is huge and very controversial, day one. A very dear friend committed suicide on duty within 2 weeks of that. And wearing my mourning badge, when an officer dies, we wear a mourning badge until they're buried. We didn't take it off. Our mourning badge is off for 3 months. My first address to the troops was at a funeral. Mm-hmm. When your first official address to your troops, you don't even have time to get your feet on the ground, is at a funeral. Mm-hmm. You've got to find a way to have the words to lift them up and say, this is not who we are, it's just what we're going through.
Right.
And so all of those things were extremely challenging, not to mention, my first phone call to a grieving family the next day, and then another phone call to 2 other grieving families that were impacted by an officer-involved accident that killed 2 family members. Mm. So unraveling the wheels that were already set in motion with the detention center, the juvenile detention center, so that we could redesign that, was all happening in between all that. So there was so much going on. At one time, it was hard to prioritize, but luckily, we're quickly able to assemble a really good team and deal with that. But it's an ongoing process. So it was challenging, but it was not insurmountable at all.
Thank you for your insight and letting our viewers know, just about you, about your vision, about you as a leader, and how you bring about everybody in the organization to create what we are trying to create together collectively with the community, with our employees and everybody together. So I commend you. Kudos to that. So if you had an extra $1 million in your budget, how would you spend it?
Girl, I wish I had it. I would easily take $200,000. I wanted to do this before, and I can't because the funds that were left over from an account that was closed at the detention center, I wanted to do this. But I wanted to take $200,000 and set it aside for community-based organizations that are dealing with kids in sports. $200,000 and give them grant money, $5,000 block grant money for kids in sports, particularly in the summer, to keep kids engaged,
right,
to pay for everything.
Right.
I would take another $200,000 and use that towards youth transition, transitioning out of either detention and into the community, so that they have the support they need. If they're turned 18, they don't have a place to live, there's a transitional housing budget so they can transition from a detention center to a housing and to a work
right alternatives program. To placement and detention.
Correct. And the other $600,000 I think I would put back in my budget, since the county council removed it from me in my overtime budget. So that's how I would spend it. I think the bulk of that, if we had extra money, it needs to go back to the community. There's no doubt.
And so with all of that being said, especially with the $600,000 that the county has neglected out of the budget. How would you handle that? How would you change that? What would you do?
Just because the money's not there doesn't mean we can't manage ourselves. I mean, managing your budgets, I think that's part of the problem. I think the budget hasn't been managed over the years. And, not too many people have an overtime budget like that. There's sometimes we can't help it. So a natural disaster occurs and we have to have these manpower and we have to have mandatory overtime. We have shortages, sickness, stuff happens. So we have to fill those spots. But I think if we manage throughout the year our budget and manage our overtime, that shouldn't be an issue to overcome. In fact, I would hope that we could save more than that.
And going back to you mentioning in the budget about providing services or programs regarding around sports for our young juveniles and just all over. How I think that's awesome. I don't think a lot of people look at sports as more than just the actual playing. It has a lot to do with emotional and mental. So talk to us a little bit about that, especially with you being, a big bodybuilder and all that. How does that help?
So I named two of the people that were most influential in my life. The third one would have been a coach. Would have been my college rugby coach, because she encouraged me no matter how hard it was. I didn't want to have debt, so I wanted to pay for everything as I went along. And she was thinking, that's not realistic. You need to invest in yourself, and you need to think of this as an investment in yourself. And she encouraged me to stay in school and to continue to invest in myself, which is what I did. That's what kept me focused. It's being able to be around that team, that group of people, because I didn't have family. I didn't have a lot of the things that people would normally say, hey, make a phone call. Hey, I need $20. Can you give me $20 for gas, Mom? Right. No, I can't. If I wanted to eat, I'd grow it or I'd go pick it. But I just learned, I survived, and I didn't have anybody to go to. I surrounded myself by people that wanted me to succeed, and she was one of those people. And I took from that, I'm a coach now. I coach the College of Charleston women's rugby team, and I have probably 80 girls that are my kids. Wow. And that will be my kids forever.
Right.
And I'm the person they can call now if they need some help and advice. I'm not going to give them a handout. I'll give them a hand up. And they know that about me. But I just remember how influential it was in my life. I mean, I couldn't have survived without that, surrounding myself by those folks.
Wow. That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about your feelings about the new juvenile facility. Go into the mindset of what do you hope to show our juvenile residents and others what this facility is more so about.
Man, this is something I'm so excited about. You know that. I mean, this I think is a huge accomplishment for us, for our team. We went into this with them laying 1,100 brick a day, and we were doing everything we could to stop the construction, not stop it, but to listen to us, to redesign a facility. Because as you know, the facility that was being built was correction-based, and we wanted rehabilitative-based to offer more programming, to offer more schooling, and to offer alternatives to detention, because we don't want kids to stay there. We want them to transition from there to other places in the community and be productive citizens. So this was a huge task that was going on in that 3 or 4 months coming in to get county council to approve more funding so that we could build it correctly and don't make the same mistake we made at the detention center. And that was a huge win. What we did is we went around the country and we looked at 3 different places, 2 in particular, one in Eugene, Oregon, and the other one in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we asked them, these are successful programs, if you could do something differently, what would you do? And we took all the information they gave us and we put it in our own building. So we have a facility unlike any other, where we'll be able to offer all the wraparound services in-house and really transition these youth back out of detention and back into the community, and still have that support when they leave.
That's awesome. Continuum of care. And that's what our young juveniles and really everyone needs. They need to have that support and those services. So kudos to your team.
Tell me we don't have the best chess team in Charleston County.
Oh, yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So with that being said, I know you had to get to this point. So you had to be a juvenile. Tell us something wild and crazy about yourself that we don't even know.
It wasn't when I was a juvenile. I mean, it's not wild and crazy. It's just stuff I do. So it was right here in Charleston. There were some radio studios right off of Leeds Avenue. And one of my favorite artists, T.I., was in town. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And T.I., it was right before T.I. was being sent to prison. And he was coming in studio for an interview. And he was supposed to be in at like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't get off till 6. So I'm kind of stalking him a little bit because I love T.I. So I go over to the studio and I start knocking on the door and I'm ringing the bell, and I know he's in there because they're like, T.I.'s in the studio.
Right.
So I'm in uniform, and the guy comes to the door, and I was like, hey, what's up? He goes, can I help you, officer? I was like, I heard T.I. was here, and he's like, he's not supposed to go to prison till like for another week. I was like, no, you don't understand. I said, no, I'm a big fan. Can I come in? I just want to meet him. So they let me in, and he's like, come on in. And I met T.I., and he was just the coolest kid. He looked young.
You're right.
And he's like, next time I'm in town, I'm going to hit you up so we can go have some gin. And I was like, okay. I gave him my number. He never called, but I was a little disappointed. Maybe he'll call me now.
Well, thank you. We are so appreciative, Sheriff Graziano, Special K, for this first episode of The Beat. The Beat. But as The Beat continues, thank you, viewers, for giving us your time and allowing us in your space. Again, thanks again, and The Beat continues.
Thank you.
This has been The Beat, a conversation about the Charleston County Sheriff's Office in our community. I am Radia B. Look for future episodes by following the Charleston County Sheriff's Office on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you go to get your podcasts.